guys, welcome to D-Land, and I guess you probably know what I'm going to talk about today. We are going to look at the AYANEO Pocket DS and the AYN Thor. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of my expectations and some of my concerns on both devices. And since there are already some reviews from some Chinese reviewers on the AYANEO Pocket DS, we'll be able to look into how it is exactly going to be in reality. In case anyone would kind of misunderstand, I am not paid and I do not receive any kind of benefits from both of the companies. I backed both of the devices and I am really excited to receive them and to do some tests and reviews on them. So if you are interested in these two devices as well, stay tuned and I'll have more updates later on. I'm going to show you the full specs of both devices and then I'll go through some of my highlights for this comparison. So if you're not familiar with the specs, you can pause the screen and take a good look at it. For the sake of this video, I'm going to focus on AYN Thor Pro and Max and not going to talk about the Lite. And here is the comparison with AYANEO Pocket DS. I believe these are some of the factors that affect people when they choose which device they're going to buy. So first of all, the screens. I believe that is one of the most important factor. When we look at AYANEO Pocket DS, they have a larger screen on top as well as a larger secondary screen. And if you compare it to AYN Thor, it is almost like 1 inch difference for both screens. Considering streaming and win later, those are basically PC games and it will be a lot easier to see when we have a larger screen than that of a smaller screen. However, still 6 inch is not way too small, so I think the top screen is okay. However, for the second screen, it would be a little bit small if your eyesight is not really good. On the other hand, a 5-inch 4x3 screen is really large and it will be very comfortable for you to play any kind of 4x3 games including PS2 and so on. The next factor that I'm going to talk about is the battery life, and we all know since both devices are dual screen devices, it is going to drain more battery comparing to a single screen device. So battery life is a key, and a bigger battery is going to be more beneficial, at least on paper. The battery on AYANEO Pocket DS is 8000 mAh, which is 2000 more than that of the AYN Thor. On paper, it will give us a lot more battery life comparing to the AYN Thor. However, we will also have to see how the heat dissipation doing and also how these larger screens on AYANEO Pocket DS is going to drain the battery comparing to AYN Thor. So maybe there is a chance that their battery life are very close. We don't know and we'll have to test it once the units are out. We will talk about the memory options, storage options, pricing, and color options in the next section. So let's talk about the ports first. On the AYANEO Pocket S, we do not have any 3.5mm audio jack. However, for the rest of them are probably the same, except the display port. So on the AYN Thor, it is listed that the display port is there. However, on the AYANEO side, they didn't talk about whether it supports display output or not. However, they did say that the USB-C is fully functional, so we're not sure whether it is also supporting the output of video or not, and we'll have to test that. I am giving more points to AYN Thor than that of AYANEO in terms of the port because of the audio jack, and this is very important to me. I know this is a personal choice, but I used to play a lot of rhythm games and I listen to music a lot, and I'm really concerned about that delay or latency in the audio. So definitely more points to AYN Thor. And if AYANEO does not support video output, then there is another score going to the AYN Thor. For the connectivity, both of the devices are using Bluetooth 5.3. However, in terms of the Wi-Fi connectivity, the AYN Thor clearly stated that they are going to use Wi-Fi 7. However, AYANEO only mentioned that in their stream, saying that they are going to use Wi-Fi 7, but on their website and Indiegogo, they mentioned that they are going to use the latest fast Wi-Fi connection without stating which version of it are they using. For the weight, I also give one more point to AYN Thor because it is 160 grams lighter than that of AYANEO Pocket DS. However, since the upper lid of AYANEO Pocket DS is made with metal, and we also know that it is a lot bigger, and with that battery, this is very normal and reasonable. It's just, well, I prefer lighter device, and that's it. Regarding the OS, both of them are running on Android 13, and we don't have to worry that some of the emulators will not run on it because it is on 13 already. Moving on to the next section, we are comparing the AYN Thor and the AYANEO Pocket DS on their prices, memory, storage, and color options. First of all, we have to understand that for AYANEO Pocket DS, there is no light version, meaning that there is no cheaper version of it. On the other hand, the AYN Thor has the light version, which is using Snapdragon 865, which is not as same as the performance of the other chipsets, and therefore we are not going to go into the details for that chipset, and we are only looking into the comparison for the Pro and Max version, as we have already mentioned. So I have actually summarized the price difference along with different color options and their memory and storage, so you can actually take a look at each on the screen, and I'll go through that. When we take a look at the cheapest option from AYANEO Pocket DS, you can see that it is already more expensive than that of most of the models from AYN Thor. However, since the AYANEO Pocket DS was announced a few days before the AYN Thor, it is very reasonable to think that AYN was actually waiting for the pricing of AYANEO and to announce a price that is more compatible than that of the Pocket DS. And considering the materials of Pocket DS is different than that of the AYN, obviously they have the metal lid and they have bigger screen, although you may argue that the AYN Thor has both OLED screens, and the Pocket DS has only one OLED screen and the other one is LCD. But we also can consider that the material difference may cause some difference, but obviously we know that AYANEO Pocket, or well, products from AYANEO is generally more expensive. So just to clarify, when I talk about pricing here, I'm not talking about the retail price, because obviously the Pocket DS is insanely expensive in terms of retail price. We are only comparing the early bird price. So looking at the same spec, considering the G3X Gen 2 is a slightly overclocked H Gen 2, so basically their performance are going to be very close. So at the same memory and storage, the AYANEO Pocket DS can be about $150 to $170 higher than that of the AYN Thor. So if you are on budget, it is a very obvious choice that you'll probably pick AYN Thor. However, I do have a few concerns, and I will talk about that later on in the video, so please bear with me and don't only look at the pricing. In addition to the pricing, AYANEO always hide their other colors behind a paywall. So if you want to get a different color with a more storage option, you have to pay like 100 or even 140 more dollars in order to get that option. On the other hand, AYN does not hide their color options as much as they would do on the AYANEO side. Obviously, if you are choosing Pro or Max, you can choose the 4 colors available, and I think it is a better choice to have more color options than that of hiding them over a paywall. So more points to AYN Thor to this area, and I personally think the white one is really pretty. So good job for AYN Thor in terms of the pricing, the storage options, and the color options. Alright, so that's pretty much about the comparison of both devices, and now we can move on to the expectations and concerns. And if you are hearing any kind of purring or meowing, that's my cat Shalulu, and she feels lonely. She wants to be with me, and she's on my table right now. So I'm sorry for all those purring, if you can hear. Alright, so let's move on to the next section. Alright, before getting into the concerns, which is going to be a large part of this video anyways, let me briefly talk about my expectation. With a dual screen device, obviously we are expecting ourselves to play some 3DS and NDS emulation, and I am actually a very multitasking focused person. As I'm an interpreter, I basically do everything like simultaneously, like multitasking. So it is really my thing. What I wanted to do is, well, I could watch contemporary anime at the top screen and play some retro games on the bottom screen, and I also could do the other way around, where I can watch some old school anime at the bottom screen and to play some contemporary games on the top screen. And furthermore, what I love to do is to read ebooks, and I love using the text-to-speech function. So what I'm going to do is to read books while hearing it at the bottom screen, and I can also play some contemporary games on the top screen. The other thing I'm expecting to do is to play some Winator games to emulate Windows. So we see that there are a lot of improvements with Winator and GameHub. So I will expect playing some PC games on our handhelds are going to be very fun. Together with the development of Eden, it is going to be fun to play more high-end stuff here. And that's pretty much about my expectation. Now we can finally dive into my concerns, and that is actually the most important part of this video. And before doing that, I would like to do a little recap, because this section is for the hinge and the fit and finishes of the devices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the hinges of my 2DS LL and my Nintendo DS, and then we will go through the footages for AYANEO Pocket DS and some details of what we may find in the AYN Thor. We can already tell that the hinge design of AYANEO Pocket DS is closer to that of a 3DS, where AYN Thor is taking the NDS route. Looking at the hinge of AYANEO Pocket DS, it looks relatively sturdy, and it is definitely not AYANEO's first attempt for making this kind of dual screen devices. They have already done it on PC, and we so far have not received any reports on the hinge cracking and stuff like that, so I have more confidence on their hinge. It is reported that there is a tiny gap between two screens, and there are two little silicone dots to prevent any kind of collisions and interference. However, it is also reported that since the D-pad is in concave shape, it is somehow interfering with the screen. And that's my major and the only concern of AYANEO Pocket DS hinge, and I do hope that they can fix it in the mass production units. Other than that, the other fit and finish and the whole overall build quality seems to be very nice. The edges seems to be well polished and the coloring seems to be very correct. I am not a fan of yellowish orange, so this is not my thing, but other than that, you can see all these buttons are well recessed. Other than that D-pad, and you can see all these edges seem to be very fine. If you do a quick Google search, you probably couldn't search any kind of issue with the previous model from AYANEO regarding their hinges or some build quality of their dual screen devices. On the other hand, Retroid has a different kind of reputation, and why I'm mentioning Retroid here is because if you know that AYN and Retroid are basically sister companies and they are owned by the same company. And that means the parts, software, and design are basically carry over from Retroid to AYN or vice versa. And when we put the photos of both AYN Thor and Retroid Pocket Flip 2 together, you can see their hinges are really alike. I wouldn't have any concern to have this kind of carryover if the hinge is robust. However, things are quite different as far as I know. It is really easy to find this kind of photos indicating the cracks in the hinges of their Retroid Flip 2. Furthermore, RyanRetro did a really good video on explaining what exactly the issue is, and let's take a look at the clip. So he stated that when he tries to close the device using his right hand from right hand side because he's right-handed, there is a repelling force from the middle part, which is where the magnet is, and it is building up a lot of forces from the central part to the right hand side, and that makes it to be very weak when they have all these pressures building up all together. Although Retroid stated that they have already fixed the problem, and they also ran some tests with robotic machine daily, and they have tested for 50,000 times. However, RyanRetro also stated that they probably done the test using the middle point of the screen instead of the side point, which is a normal human being would close the screen. That makes the test has some kind of bias because that's the strongest point to close the lid rather than the weakest. I sincerely hope that there will be no issue with the hinge. I already paid for it and I'm looking forward to it, and I really hope that they are going to fix it in their mass-produced unit. But let's say I really didn't pick the atomic purple because I think it would look ugly if there is any kind of issue with the hinge. But well, they have 1 year warranty, so let's hope that things will go well with all these things. But still, we have not got any real footage with their actual unit, so I'm a little bit worried about that. My second concern is the ergonomics. So I'll go through AYANEO first. I have had good experience with AYANEO devices. Their grips are really good for my hands. My hands are really small and they just fit very well on my hand. So in terms of gripping, I think it is going to be a good product for this Pocket DS. However, it is also a 550 grams device, so it's going to be quite heavy, and since this is a dual screen kind of like a block kind of shaped device, so I'm a little bit worried about the weight distribution. It could be, comfortable to hold, and it could be very like a brick kind of heavy. We do not know how it is like until we can get it on hand, so that is my major concern regarding the AYANEO Pocket DS. In terms of AYN Thor, I believe it is a lot lighter and therefore probably going to be easier to hold. However, there is no grip at the back, so it is going to be pretty similar to what it is like a DS or a 3DS. I'm not sure adding that little bit of weight on it would be comfortable to hold or not, but I also know that there will be grips provided by AYN and you can purchase it. However, the grip is tilting outward, and with the experience of Odin 2, I'm really not good at using those kind of grips that are tilting outward. So I just hope that I can get the similar experience like a normal 3DS that I have, and I actually feel pretty comfortable on my 3DS. So I really hope that it is going to be comfortable on the Thor, on the AYN Thor, even with these like flat kind of surfaces. Moving forward to my next concern, it is the buttons and input lag. We have already seen some of the reviewers showing off the buttons and the input testing of AYANEO Pocket DS, and I also have had good experience with AYANEO Pocket Air previously. So basically I can play whatever rhythm games without like severe input lag, and I can get quite a good result. As you can see here, the buttons seems to be very comfortable to hold, and the diagonals and the triggers and other buttons are also going pretty well and quite responsive. So I do not have a lot of concern regarding the input and the buttons on AYANEO. In fact, it just seemed to be very promising from all the footages we can see. However, it could be a concern if you are expecting a larger truffle in the triggers. You can also kind of fine-tune with these triggers, but if you are really into like racing games, that may be a bummer. And the joysticks seem to be smaller, but still they do not have a lot of dead stones, and you can also calibrate it inside the apps. And there are 2 extra buttons for you to register to whatever you want. So there are some buttons at the bottom that we are going to talk about later on for multiple functions like home and switching screens and so on. So those are the things about the buttons on AYANEO, and I am pretty positive about the buttons on it. On the other hand, the latency issue on AYN side is a little bit worrying. You can see there is a comparison being done on the latency test, and it is quite famous for Odin 2 and the other Odin devices having this kind of latency issue, and so does Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. I used to own an Odin 2 and I could barely play Taiko no Tatsujin on it. It was like terrible on it, and it was so slow that I couldn't finish the game. So I didn't make it up. You can also go to SBC Gaming, finding this kind of Reddit post. It is pretty common to see people could not bear the input latency on Odin 2. So my only concern is that this device has 2 screens, and with that input latency and with that issue going on with the retro dual screen latency, although it is already fixed, I know, but still there are like subtle differences. So if this input latency added up with the screen latency, would that be a problem of gaming, especially for rhythm games or some games require you to have a short reaction time kind of thing? So that is my major concern. However, still we do not have any actual mock-up or like any videos showing the actual actions that we can have on the device, so this is remain unclear. and the concern is remain there. On the other hand, searching for the same post, you can just only see people are saying AYANEO is pricey, but you don't find any kind of complaint regarding their input latency. So I would give more point to AYANEO in terms of the buttons and input latency, and maybe that's a hot take, but that's how I think about the buttons and input latency issues. Moving on to my next concern, it is the software. If it is a single screen device, I wouldn't worry much about the software, but since this is a dual screen device, obviously Android is not giving a good support to dual screen devices, so there are a lot of things that we need to rely on the company to provide their own software in order to make sure the control and the operation is easier for the users. We can see that AYANEO has already incorporated a lot of features onto their software, including swapping screens, changing this kind of operations. You can see they also have this swipe up function available in their screens. There are like TTP controls, whatever control centers, that those kind of functions are already included in the second screen, including the fan speed and so on. So we see that AYANEO is in a good place in terms of software development. So how about AYN Thor? The only thing we know is that AYN Thor is going to have its own control center called the TCC, and this is probably how it is going to look like. We do not know what kind of further functions are going to be incorporated to this control center, and we only have 2 images of how it is going to look like. So I think they are still being developed, and I do hope they are going well with the development. But given about the things that are going on the Retroid side with their dual screen attachment, I'm a little bit worried. You know, if you are hearing all this news, they had some kind of delay which was fixed in their OTA update, and then they also found some issues with RP4 that they couldn't make it support it, and then they also fix it. So it takes time and it probably going to go well, but I do hope that things are going as well as how AYANEO is doing, so that when we receive our devices, it is going to be smooth and easy to use. My 5th concern is actually related to the previous one, so it is related to the screen. We know that AYANEO is using one OLED screen and one LED screen. So far it looks good, and I don't think it looks unbalanced or so on, but I also want to know how well these 2 screens are synchronized. So far from the footages we can see, they are well synchronized, and I don't see a very large difference in terms of coloring. I hope that it still looks as good as we can see in the footage in real life, so that we won't feel the unbalanced kind of touching. And you know, as long as it is smooth enough for both screens, I don't mind one of them being LCD. But I do know that there are people who don't like the second screen to be LCD, so we'll have to find out whether it is a good thing for the second screen to be a LCD screen or not. For AYN Thor, we know that they are going to have both OLED screen, and they also talk about some refresh rate and so on, but still we do not have any actual footage of it. Therefore, it's a mystery about how it is going to look like in reality, and we'll have to wait. So I am really not sure about how they are doing things, and as I mentioned already, there were stuff going on with Retroid's dual screen attachment, so I do hope things are going well with AYN, but we'll have to wait to see. My final concern is the shipment date. First of all, for AYANEO, they promised that they are going to ship domestically in China by the end of September, and they are going to ship globally in October. So, well, first of all, both of the companies had some kind of record that they may delay the shipment, so I am not like 100% positive on this area, but still they have already started mass production in August for AYANEO, so I have more confidence. On the other hand, for AYN Thor, we only know that AYN said they are going to ship the devices starting from mid-October, and there is nothing other than that. Why I'm worrying is that, first of all, if they have completed their development, they should be able to flex their device. Like, we have no actual photo other than the 4 pictures that they shown us in Discord, which are the only 4 real pictures, and there is like no footage, nothing, and there is nothing about the development progress. Like, for AYANEO, although their like live streams has no sound and poor interpretation and stuff like that, they show us progresses. But for AYN Odin, there is nothing we could see. And you know, like, AYANEO has already shipped their devices to reviewers in China, but for AYN there is like nothing happening that way. At least at the time that I'm making this video, today is the 4th of September Japan time. Now is in the afternoon, it's about 4 o'clock, so I don't know about like AYN Thor. Are they going to be able to ship their devices on time? I'm not sure, and I have no confidence in that. I think probably they're going to ship the black ones first, because that's going to be the light version, and in all the other versions, so probably it is going to ship first. But how about the others? Like, in their like normal practice, they are probably going to ship the other colors based on the sequence of the production. So there will be someone who is going to receive their devices earlier, and some of the other people choosing other colors are going to receive their device later, which is, well, okay. But at this point, we only have 1.5 months left for their shipping window, and there's still nothing to be flexed. I am worried, especially when we see the attachment for Retroid has been postponed for like 2 times or 3 times. I can imagine similar things could happen to AYN Thor. I hope they don't, and I hope everything is going well in the ideal scenario. So for that, I'm really not sure, but I dream that I would receive both of my AYN Thor and AYANEO Pocket DS in October. That's my hope. Alright, so that's pretty much about this video, and I will definitely give you more follow-up videos when I receive my devices. So I will see you in my next video, and bye!